Hey, my name's TC Burr. Welcome to Yet, a podcast created to encourage you to get your goal or idea out of your head and into reality. On this podcast, you'll hear stories, encouragements, tips, and ideas to help you write your book, start your business, launch your podcast, or whatever it is you hope to accomplish. Because it's not that you haven't done it, it's just that you haven't done it yet. Hey, my guest today is Kim Mosiman. Kim, how are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you.
Well, I am so glad to have you join the podcast today. So typically the way that I start things on this show is I encourage my guests to kind of tell a little bit about who they are and what they do. So I could talk a little bit about what I know about you, but I always think it's more interesting to hear from the guest directly. So if you could, in 30 to 60 seconds, tell people kind of who you are and what you do.
My name is Kim. I am first and foremost a wife, a mother, and a new grandmother. I am a nutritionist and a personal trainer and a life coach, and most recently an author.
So you've done a lot of pretty amazing things. I have to say, when you were running through your list there, I could see you visibly light up when you said new grandmother. That one's kind of high on the list. How long have you been a grandmother?
He's 8 months old.
Oh,
and
wow.
I have a second one on the way next month. So,
oh, congratulations! That is so cool.
Yeah, it's very cool.
So
everyone says it'll be the best thing that you've ever done, and they're right.
And they're right. Yeah. It's so funny. I have kids, and my parents, it's so awesome to watch them as grandparents. Like it's so fun to see the energy and excitement that they have. So that's cool. Congratulations, by the way. That's amazing. So talk a little bit about, you mentioned that you are a nutritionist. How long have you done that work?
It's been 15 years.
15 years. And what made you decide to take that career path or get into that career path?
I was overweight after having kids of my own, and I started at a gym, like a competition gym, and I caught the bug, and I decided that that's what I wanted to do for a living myself. I received my nutrition certification as well as my personal training certifications and opened a gym, and that's what I did for 7 years. I helped people find the very best things in themselves and find motivation to lose weight and get healthy.
That's awesome. So were you working prior to that and this was like a big career overhaul, or was this kind of like your entry into the workforce after having kids? Or talk a little bit about how you went through that transition.
It was a huge overhaul. My husband and I owned several fast food restaurants, and we worked together. And, after a lot of years doing the same thing that your spouse does, when you're sitting at the kitchen table and all you have to talk about is the kids and your job, eventually one of you has to do something different. And so when I caught the fitness bug, it just seemed like the right thing, and he was all on board and supportive, and I opened a gym, and we lived separate lives and survived. It was great.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So you mentioned also that you are you've written a book, right? So talk a little bit about kind of what is your book about, and maybe what was your inspiration to write it?
My book's title is Reflections of Joy: Learning to Love the Woman You See While Becoming the One You're Meant to Be. All along while I was running the gym, I kept thinking, take notes. This will be a great book someday. Share other people's stories, tell people how to get fit. And when I started writing in November of 21, my book was really going to be a how-to book. How to eat, how to exercise, how to take care of your body. But it changed because I changed. I've grown older, and I'm not the same woman I used to be. Losing weight doesn't happen the same way it used to. And I kind of entered a brief period. I don't know if I'd call it depression, but just a low point in my life. And I realized that as a 55-year-old woman, things don't happen the way they did when I was in my 30s and 40s. And the book really became more of a how I. book than a how-to book. It's how I learned to love myself through the process and how I learned to accept myself through the process. I certainly am not, I don't know, I'm a big advocate of body neutrality, if that's what you want to call it, or body responsibility. I think that every person is worthy and beautiful as they are, but I think we have a responsibility to take care of ourselves and to set our children and our grandchildren up to not have to take care of us later in life, if that makes sense. And so my book, like I said, it became a how I book, and I hope to inspire my readers with the different things that I did that maybe aren't normal. I no longer work out to get my heart rate up to 160 beats per minute. I work out so that I can work out again tomorrow. It just, and, I spent a lot of life teaching people to cut things out of their diet and maybe deprive themselves a little bit. And life's too short. And so I really try to focus on more of an 80-20 approach to nutrition. I want people to love their lives. And so I put all that into the book, and I tried to encourage women of all ages and men too. My book is specifically geared towards women, but just to enjoy life. If you're lucky enough to live this life, you might as well enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. So did you have, you mentioned that as you were kind of going through your own personal journey, you kind of said to yourself, like, oh, take notes. This could make a really good book one day. Do you have a background in writing? Is that something you've had experience with prior, or was this kind of your first endeavor into the world of writing? Talk a little bit about kind of how you got there.
I'm a journaler. And
Okay.
I've been a journaler for a long time.
Okay.
And I wrote newsletters when I owned the gym. Every week I'd send something out, with recipes and encouragement and a story or two. And that led into blogging, which kind of came full circle and made me think maybe I could write a book.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's amazing. So what specific to, I mean, you can take this any way you want, whether you talk about the nutrition and wellness or the writing or any other aspect of life. Like, what are some of the big, and you can go either mindset or practical, but what are some of the big challenges that you've had to overcome personally when you're going after some of these goals?
Imposter syndrome is huge. And people would talk about it and I didn't believe it. Because when I ran a gym, when I ran a restaurant, I was good at what I did. I was the boss, and, but then coming out into a world where I'm not the boss, and I don't have the degree in English, and I don't have a theological degree. All these things that I'm trying to write about and I'm trying to express to people, I'm not the expert. And boy, it caught me time and time and time again. And I wrote a lot of bad words, and just to get them on the page. And I went back and I made them better, and then I made them better, and then I finally made them good enough that I thought somebody else could read them. So
yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. So you talked a little bit about, you mentioned theology, and I know you and I have connected a little bit prior to this conversation. Your faith, I think, is a big part of your journey. Talk a little bit about the importance of that and how that has kind of equipped you and encouraged you and propelled you along as you've been doing this.
it was the missing piece for me. I've always believed. I believed when I was a little kid, and I believed all throughout my life. I've had a lot of moments where I thought, oh, I should remember to go back. I should remember to say thanks. But it's easy to forget about God. And when I was running a gym and it was successful and I was busy, there just wasn't time. And so I kind of put him on a shelf. And then once I had retired and closed the gym, I started doing a little reading, a little playing around, just, journaling or reading the Bible once in a while, but I wasn't actively attending church. And one day I was journaling and I flipped a page, and those journals that have like the little quotes or the scripture at the bottom or whatever. And it there was something, and I don't even remember what the scripture was, but I just started to cry. And I realized that through all of my sadness and through everything that I had been going through, the piece that was missing for me in my wellness journey was my spiritual wellness. And so I actively started reading my Bible again, and I sought out a church. I have a great church family now, thanks to my daughter-in-law, who kind of said, "Hey, let's go check this out," And now I've really come to a point where I believed that he has something he wants me to do. I'm just not sure what that is yet. And the book is just the beginning. I'm hoping to open doors, talk to more people, help more women and more men feel good about themselves, and to find time for God and for just actively doing new things, really finding their purpose and finding joy in their lives.
Yeah. I think so many people just kind of go through the motions of life, right? Like you go to school, you get the job, you buy the house, and you just kind of exist. But it sounds like, especially once you kind of had this spiritual, I don't know what you want to call it, but this kind of recognition that there was distance between you and God, and you wanted to kind of get back. It sounds like there's a lot more intentionality in what you're doing now. And I love, one of my favorite passages of scripture is in Luke 15, the story of the prodigal son, who I think in some ways that's all of our story, right? Like we've taken the gifts that God's given us and run far from him, but he's always gracious to welcome us back. If we would turn and come back, he's always so gracious and kind to welcome us back. So that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yes.
When it comes to your writing, so how long, just kind of practically, how long did it take you from, you're kind of collecting these ideas? It sounds like you've been journaling and blogging along the way. So you've got maybe a lot of the content building up. But when you decided, hey, this is going to be a book, how long did it take you from that point to where you are now, which is, I think you're in pre-sale, right? Like you've got, the book is basically done. What was that? Was that a couple years deal, or how long did it take you to get there?
I signed a contract with a hybrid publisher and started in November of 21.
Okay.
And it's really been it's kind of like self-publishing with some guidance, some learning, and they take care of all the background stuff that a writer doesn't maybe know how to do. But yeah, it has been. I turned in my final manuscript 1 year after I started.
Okay.
And which I think is typical. I know that there are programs out there that say you can do it faster. But gosh, going from an idea to a complete book is a lot more work than I ever dreamed it was.
I think that's every writer that I've talked to has said something to that effect. Like, I thought it would be, I like writing and I think I'm good at it, but once I started doing it, I realized it's not that easy.
Well, I think we all have that image of, somebody sitting in a little cabin in the woods or
right.
out on the, looking at the ocean, and they sit down with a stack of paper and a typewriter, and like 2 days later, there it is.
There's the book.
That's not the case.
Well, it's funny. Yeah, it's funny because for a long time, that was the picture that I had. So when I would have these ideas of like, hey, you should write a book, to me, it was always this impossible dilemma of like, well, I work full time and I've got a family. I can't, I don't own a cabin out in the woods or at the beach somewhere. So I can't just, exit my normal life and go write. So in my mind, it was always this false dichotomy of like, okay, you either stay at your job and handle your responsibilities, or you can be a writer. And, one of them didn't sound very fun. The other didn't sound very feasible. But I finally made the realization that like, no, you can do both. Like the only thing that is keeping you from being a writer is the fact that you're not writing. And so I think that for me, that kind of mindset and perspective shift was huge. But yeah, it takes a little bit longer when you're doing it in the midst of normal life. Hey, listeners. So I'm doing it. I'm writing my book. It is a lot of fun. It's way harder than I thought it would be. It is sometimes really painfully slow, but I'm doing it. I'm taking a story that has existed for a long time in my head and I'm putting it on pages. And I am so excited to continue this process, to continue editing. And I'm just really, really excited to bring this story to you eventually. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I am so looking forward to that day when I can share it out with more people and hold a copy of the book, the bound, finished book that I have written. Hey, listen, if you are a writer or know any writers, I want to hear those stories. So would you please, if you know a writer or you are a writer, connect with me. I want to hear your story. I want to hear about what you're writing, why you're writing, how you got into writing, and what your process has looked like so far. Whether you're just at the beginning stages or you've already published one or more books, I want to hear your story. So send me an email. It's connect@tcburr.com. You can also go to my website. It's tcburr.com. You'll find a link there to contact me. Let's get in touch. I want to talk with you. I want to hear your story, and I want to encourage other people with it. Thanks. Back to the show. So I'm curious from your perspective, Kim, when you were writing, what did your process look like? Like, did you have a specific time of day? Were you tracking a word count, or like what kind of systems or processes did you use to accomplish that, that completed manuscript within a year?
I start every day with writing, and I do follow kind of a morning pages by Julia Cameron mindset. I sit down and I just clear the cobwebs and I write whatever comes to mind.
Okay.
Sometimes that becomes part of the book because I work best first thing in the morning and, before the sun comes up. And I really try to set my day up so that I wake, I write, and then I walk. And that's when I kind of work out the kinks. It's when I talk to God. And then sometimes I come back and I have all the answers from everything I was stuck on before I went for my walk. So early mornings are set aside. There are times when I got stuck, and a lot of times I also had this idea in my head that I had to write sitting at my computer. I had to write with a pen in my journal. And a lot of my book was created while I was walking with either the notes app open, and I was talking into it, or I finally bought a recorder. And, writing is writing. It doesn't matter whether you use your fingers or you use your mouth, But then, and a lot of people that I met through this process, they started at the beginning and they ended at the end, and I was all over the place. It was I knew what my chapter titles or my chapter topics were.
Yeah.
So I wrote about what I felt like writing about that day, and good, bad, or otherwise, it finally came to be. And
Yeah. That's cool. That's very similar. So our books are different, but the process seems somewhat similar. So I've told people I've basically completed a draft. It's very drafty, but and it's kind of the same thing. Like there are some, there's 20 pages where it's cohesive and this storyline makes sense. Mine's a novel. But then there are others where I'm just, I just need to develop this character. So I'll spend some time doing that. And then whatever the inspiration is leading that day is where I'm. So I tell people mine right now is kind of like if you took a jigsaw puzzle and dumped it out on the table. Like there's some sections that look pretty put together and you can tell what it is, but then there's some pieces over here that we need to rearrange and maybe slide some things over. Some pieces that maybe go to a completely different puzzle that I'm going to eventually, save for later. Yeah. But yeah, so I always admire and respect the people who can be very linear, start at the start and end at the end. But yeah, it's a little more scattered for me right now. But so it's good to hear that I'm not the only one who does that.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Kim, specifically with your writing journey, what are some of the biggest, and I think you probably would have a ton of answers to this based on the content of your work. What are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned either about the process or maybe about yourself. Like, what are some of the things that you've learned over your years, specifically when it comes to your writing journey?
Most recently I've learned that I have to trust myself, because when I wake up in the morning and there's something fresh and raw in my brain, and I can sit down and it just flows, I need to let it be. What I've learned, the most important thing I've learned is that I believe most people should not write and edit at the same time. I think our best work comes out in a flow, and when we analyze it, it 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 just messes it up.
Yeah.
Editing's for later. Um, and I've learned that I have something to say. I'm in pre-sale, and I have an incredible launch team reading my words now, and the things they're saying to me are exactly what I wanted. All the things I worried about, because you can write the words and you can put a blog out there, but you can always take the blog down, right? But
Sure.
but the
Yeah.
moment
Yeah.
that book is published and it's for sale, and it's on a shelf in the Library of Congress, and it's there forever, you can't take back your words. And
That's right.
so,
Yeah.
I prayed long and hard that people would receive my words the way that I intended them. And the comments I'm getting are, oh my gosh, I feel like we're just sitting across the table having a cup of coffee. I feel like we could be sisters. All the things that I wanted. And so
Yeah.
I think the biggest lesson I've learned through all of this is just be yourself. Don't second guess. Don't write what you think people want you to write. Write the story that's on your heart and just put it into the world. Somebody's going to connect and somebody's going to love it.
That's so good. And it connects, I think, back to what you were saying earlier about, your struggle with imposter syndrome, which I think everybody who's ever tried to step out and do something big has dealt with that at some level. But it's just such a good reminder. And I try to tell people all the time, the world needs what you have to offer. Your story is important, and it's not going to be the same as anyone else's story, but you never know who you might impact, who you might inspire, who you might encourage with the things that you've gone through, the lessons you've learned. So I love that perspective. I think that's spot on. And it's hard as someone who is a creator, which you and I would say are both creators. It's hard sometimes to believe that about yourself, because who am I, right? But it's so cool to hear that, you're getting that kind of affirmation from people who are reading your story and saying, wow, I feel like you're talking right to me. I feel like we could be sisters. That's so cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So if you were talking to someone who maybe, you're talking to one of your kids or some of their friends who are thinking like, I just feel stuck in life. I'm not, I don't feel like I'm where I need to be, whether it's, career wise or spiritual or whatever, or maybe they have some direction around, hey, I've got this thing I want to do. I've got an idea for a book, or I've got this idea for this company that I want to start, but I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. And I'm really having doubts. What advice would you give to somebody who is just starting out and maybe struggling with kind of that confidence of like, do I have what it takes? And what if I fail?
Write it down. And I don't mean like a book, but write it down, make a plan. If you want to write a book, make an outline, a business plan, but go out and find other people, bounce your ideas off of them. But, look at the things that have been hits in our lifetime that everyone would have thought, oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I just think you got to go for it. Now, you have to be responsible. You still have to pay the bills, right?
Sure.
You still have to do the things. But I think you have to organize, and I think you have to learn. I've done so much reading, and trying to market a book right now is something I know nothing about. But I'm reading, and I'm learning, and I'm growing, and I just think so many people are stuck in lives that don't bring them joy, and maybe you've got to find that joy just a little bit at a time. maybe you do something fun. Maybe you volunteer at first before you like take a total plunge and like make it your own business. Go work for somebody else or go volunteer and see if you really do love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's pretty easy to sit in my chair and look at your life and think it's better than mine, right? So
Sure.
maybe take little steps.
I think that's great.
I start just like with us writers. I started blogging. I don't know about you, but I started putting my words out into the world a little bit at a time, just to see if it was received.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great. So, so you mentioned resources. So you talked about, I don't know anything about marketing, but I'm learning as I go, and it sounds like you do a lot of reading, and I'm sure maybe there's some podcasts or some other resources that have helped you along the way. Are there any, so this podcast, people who listen to this, a lot of them are writers. Some of them are going to be, people who want to start companies or do other things. Are there any resources that you would recommend for people, whether it's practical, real kind of boots on the ground type things, or even just kind of mindset motivation? Like what are some of the best resources you could point folks to?
For me, the very best resource has been a writing group that I belong to, because there's always someone in the group that's either a little bit ahead of me or had a different life experience. And I've found great coaches through that writers group. My cohort, or the group of people that started at the same time I did with this hybrid publisher, I've learned so many things from them, and we share books across the way, or proofreaders, editors, whatever the case may be. But that would be no matter what you're doing, whether it's writing or whether you're starting a business, get involved with other people who are doing the same thing, and read. Man, I think we have to be lifelong learners, right? And sometimes that means cracking open a book and really, really digging in. Right now I'm reading Sell Your Book Like Wildfire. It's I've learned so many things that have made the journey so much easier just over the last week. And one book, and it doesn't mean it's the only one, but I just keep searching until something clicks with me.
Yeah, that's great. So I love that you brought in the idea of involving other people. So you mentioned your writing group. That's one of the things that I found has been really important for me, especially when you talk about, having the fears and the doubts and the imposter syndrome, but having a network, having a community of people who you can bounce ideas off of, who can give you encouragement or accountability, I think is so cool. The other thing that has been really critical for me is encouragement. And one of the big goals that I have with this podcast is I want to encourage other people who have an idea, who are thinking about, writing or doing something. I want to encourage them with others' stories of people like you who have said, you know what, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to try it out and see what happens. So I'm curious, and this is something that I ask a lot of my guests, but is there a time where you can think of something that someone said or something that someone's done for you that was just a super encouraging moment, and maybe they didn't even realize that it was such a big deal? But is there anything you could point to in your background where you thought, wow, that was super encouraging?
I don't know. It's most recent, it's going to sound strange. The most encouraging thing came when my kids and my husband read my work and they tell me they're proud of me because they know who I am inside and out. They know where the stories come from. They know every side of me, not just the side that I might show on a podcast or on my social media posts, and when my kids and my husband and my daughter-in-laws, when they say, "We're so proud of you," or "This is really good work, Mom," I mean, that hits, just right in the middle of my heart. There's nothing that makes me happier. If I sell one book, it's okay because I've made them proud of me.
That's amazing. That's super powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Well, Kim, this has been a lot of fun. I've really loved hearing your story. I just have one final question before I let you go. Where can people follow your journey? If somebody says, "Hey, this sounds like a book for me," or "I want to know more about what she's doing," give me your website, your social media, all that stuff. How do people connect and follow along with what you're doing?
My website is Kim Mosiman Wellness, and I am on Instagram and Facebook, just Kim Mosiman. And maybe someday I'll be in all the other places, but for right now, those are the three I'm hanging out in. So
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you giving the time today. I think people are going to be super encouraged by your story. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing it with me. Hey, thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you would do me a huge favor, if you got value out of this podcast, which I'm assuming maybe you did since you're still here, would you scroll down to the bottom of your podcast app and rate and review the show? And maybe share it with someone on social media or with a friend, just in a conversation. It would mean so much to get this message out to more people, and I think it would be amazing if you would share it. So that would be, as a personal favor to me, I'd really love it. Also, if you want to know more about me and what I'm working on, you can visit my website. It's tcburr.com. I hope you'll check it out. You can contact me there. Thanks again, and I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.